The Sorel Dominion was the heart of many star systems. It was a place of shining towers, glowing bridges between cities, and fleets of silver ships that sailed across the stars. At the center of it all stood the palace of Queen Marana. She was strong, wise, and respected by many, but behind her eyes rested a quiet worry. Her only daughter, young Princess Lyra, was her joy and her reason to keep ruling with patience. The queen had ruled for many years, balancing peace with the threats of jealous neighbors. Yet inside her realm, discontent was rising. Some thought her laws too strict, others thought her kindness too weak. Whispers grew into speeches. Speeches turned into secret meetings, and those meetings birthed rebellion. The queen knew unrest was stirring, but she did not know how close the storm had come. One evening, as the red sun sank behind the palace towers, a celebration was held. It was the princess's birthday. The halls glowed with light, music filled the air, and alien nobles from every world of the Dominion came to show respect. The young princess, dressed in silver cloth and a crown of blue crystal, laughed as she chased small lights that floated above her head. She was loved by all who saw her, but outside the palace shadows gathered. Rebel forces, dressed in plain armor with no mark, moved through the streets. Their ships blocked the skies above the city. Their plan was not only to challenge the queen but to strike at her heart. Inside the palace walls, the queen lifted her daughter into her arms. She whispered soft words to her, words of comfort. The girl smiled, but then the first explosion shook the towers. Windows shattered, alarms rang, and the music ended in silence. Guards rushed to the queen's side, shouting warnings. The rebels had struck. Chaos spread fast. The once bright hall became a place of smoke and fear. Nobles scattered, guards fought at the doors, and the queen was pulled by her protectors towards safety. Yet in the rush, the princess slipped from her arms. She ran into a side corridor, frightened by the sudden noise. The queen shouted her name, but her voice was drowned by the clash of steel and the roar of fire. Princess Lyra found herself lost in the dim corridors of the palace. Smoke stung her eyes, and the sound of blasters echoed from every side. She tried to find her way back, clutching the pendant her mother had given her. It was shaped like a star, glowing faintly blue, a symbol of her royal line. She whispered to herself to stay strong, just as her mother had always told her. Then strangers appeared. Two men in dark armor ran into the hallway. One looked at her with cold eyes. They did not see a child but an opportunity. Before she could flee, strong hands grabbed her. She cried out, but no guard heard her. They carried her through hidden passages, away from the queen, away from safety. By the time the palace guards regained control of the main halls, the princess was gone. The queen searched every chamber. She ordered her fleets to scan every street and every ship. The Dominion's best trackers followed trails through broken districts and ruined ports. Yet no trace of the princess was found. Witnesses spoke of rebels fleeing with something hidden in their arms, but no one knew where they went. The uprising ended in blood and silence. The queen's loyal forces crushed the rebellion after many days of fighting. The palace was rebuilt, the towers stood tall again, and the Dominion remained under her rule. But her heart had been broken. In the throne room where once she had sat with her daughter by her side, now she sat alone. Her crown felt heavier than ever. She ruled with firm commands, but her eyes often looked to the stars, as if hoping one day her daughter would return. Years passed. Nobles still bowed, fleets still guarded the borders, and the Dominion still thrived. But songs in the marketplace carried sadness. They sang of the lost princess who vanished in the night of fire. Many believed she had perished during the uprising. Others whispered she had been taken far away, perhaps sold or hidden by those who hated the queen. The queen herself never spoke of what she believed. To her people she was strong and unbroken. To herself she was a mother who lived with endless sorrow. Far from the capital, in quiet corners of the galaxy, the story of the lost princess traveled as rumor. Traders told it around campfires on mining colonies. Drifters shared it in the shadowy bars of frontier stations. Some claimed they had seen a girl with royal eyes. Others said she had been taken to worlds beyond the reach of the Dominion. None of these tales reached the queen with proof, and so they remained as dreams and echoes. But fate is never still. While the queen ruled and the stars moved in their endless dance, one human far from Earth listened to such stories with great care. His name was Thomas. He was no noble, no soldier, no scholar. He was a wanderer who fixed machines, traded goods, and helped strangers when he could. To him, the story of the queen and her lost daughter was more than rumor. It was a mystery worth chasing, though he did not yet know why. Thomas had once stood in the Dominion capital as a young traveler. He had seen the queen from afar, her crown shining, her face noble but heavy with sorrow. He remembered the sadness in her eyes, and it never left his mind. So when he heard whispers of a child taken long ago, whispers that never seemed to fade, he began to follow the trail. For now, the galaxy still believed the princess lost. The queen still carried her grief, and in the quiet halls of the palace, her heart remained divided between duty and longing. The story was not over. The first chapter had only begun with loss. The path that would bring mother and daughter together again still lay hidden, waiting for the hand of a human to guide it forward. Thomas was a man who never stayed in one place for long. His life was made of travel from one world to another, fixing machines that no one else wanted to touch. He was human, a stranger among the countless alien species of the galaxy. Many thought humans were too plain, too fragile. But Thomas carried a stubborn spirit that gave him respect even among those who doubted him. He owned a small ship called Wanderer. It was not beautiful and it was not fast, but it was steady. Its engines were patched more times than he could count. Its walls carried scratches from years of journeys, yet it always held together. Thomas had no family in the stars, only a small list of friends he had made while helping people on different worlds. One day his travels brought him to the ruins of an old trade station near the edge of the Dominion. The station floated around a dying star, broken and forgotten. Traders no longer used it, and scavengers had taken almost everything of value. But Thomas liked to explore such places. He believed that lost places still held stories, and sometimes those stories carried more value than gold. Inside the station, his lamp cut through the dust. Broken signs hung from the walls. Silent corridors stretched out like the ribs of a giant beast. He expected nothing more than old wires or scrap metal, but as he searched, he found a small locked chamber behind a fallen bulkhead. It took him hours to force it open. Inside, he discovered a crashed escape pod half buried in rubble. Its hull was marked with strange patterns he did not recognize, but the design was too fine to belong to scavengers. He carefully opened its hatch and found a sealed container inside. Within the container rested data crystals, old but still working. Thomas carried them back to his ship and connected them to his reader. The screens flickered and showed records in the Dominion's royal code. He leaned closer as he realized what he was seeing. The data spoke of a ship that had fled during the uprising years ago. It carried rebels, stolen treasures, and something else that the rebels kept secret from even their own. One file made him pause. It spoke of a child of great value taken from the palace and hidden among smugglers. The record was not clear, as if someone had tried to erase it, but Thomas understood enough. The words matched the old story he had heard so many times. This was no rumor. This was proof. His hands tightened on the screen. He remembered the queen's face from long ago, the sorrow in her eyes as she stood before her people. If this record was true, then her daughter might still be alive. Thomas thought hard. He could have sold the crystals to collectors or to Dominion officials. The reward would have been more than enough to live comfortably. But he was not that kind of man. He felt the weight of the discovery pressing on him. It was not gold he had found. It was hope. For the next weeks, Thomas followed the trail. The records mentioned names of rebel smugglers and the routes they had taken. Most of those names were dead now, killed in the fighting or hunted by the Queen's soldiers. But a few had left traces in the galaxy. He began visiting stations, colonies, and trade routes, asking careful questions. On a mining world called Varan, he met an old trader with scarred hands. Over a shared meal of dry bread and soup, Thomas spoke of strange rumors about a lost child. The trader's eyes narrowed and he leaned closer. He whispered that long ago he had seen a girl with golden eyes unlike any other. She was traveling with smugglers who treated her as their own. They claimed she was simply an orphan, but the pendant around her neck had carried a glow he never forgot. Thomas thanked him and moved on. His heart beat faster. He began to hear more fragments of the same tale. A girl raised in secrecy, moved from place to place, always watched by hard men who never explained who she truly was. The trail stretched across many worlds. On a dusty moon, Thomas found a record in a trader's log mentioning a child called Mira, who was not like the others. On a floating city above a gas giant, A mechanic remembered fixing a ship for smugglers who carried a silent girl with them. She had eyes full of questions but never spoke. Each clue pushed Thomas forward. He grew tired and his ship needed repairs, but he refused to stop. Something inside him told him this was his path, that he could not walk away from it. Yet danger began to follow him. One night on a frontier station, two men in plain armor confronted him. They asked him what he was looking for. Thomas answered with a lie, saying he was only trading for parts. The men watched him with cold suspicion. He understood then that others still wished the princess never to be found. The enemies of the queen were not gone, only hidden. Thomas kept his search quiet after that. He spoke only in whispers, traded only with those he trusted, and moved quickly from place to place. Still, he did not stop. He believed the girl was out there, waiting for someone to bring her home. Months passed before he reached a remote asteroid colony near the edge of known space. It was a place of miners, drifters, and smugglers, where no law reached and no queen's banner flew. He entered the colony's main hall, a low chamber filled with smoke and the sound of machines. There, among the workers, he saw her. She was not a child anymore, but a young woman. Her clothes were plain, her hands rough from work, but her eyes carried a quiet fire. Around her neck hung a small pendant glowing faintly blue. It was shaped like a star. Thomas stood still. He knew the symbol. He knew the story. This was the daughter of the queen. He did not speak to her at once. Instead, he watched her for hours, learning how she moved, how she spoke to the miners, how she lived as if she was one of them. She laughed with friends, but there was a sadness in her gaze whenever she was alone. That night, as the colony grew quiet, Thomas finally approached her. He introduced himself as a traveler, a human passing through. She looked at him with suspicion and asked why he cared to speak with her. He told her he had seen many stars, but her pendant shone brighter than them all. Her hand went to the pendant as if to protect it. She said it was only a gift from the ones who raised her. Thomas gently told her that the symbol belonged to the royal bloodline of the Scifi Dominion. She laughed at first, saying he must be mistaken. She was no princess. She was only Mira, a worker of the colony. But Thomas did not give up. He spoke of the queen, of the night of the uprising, of the child that vanished. He told her of the records he found, of the whispers he followed. As he spoke, her face grew pale. Her hand trembled on the pendant. For the first time in her life, she wondered who she truly was. Their talk was cut short when the sound of boots echoed in the hall. A group of armed men entered, their eyes searching. Thomas knew they were bounty hunters, hired to make sure the girl never discovered her past. He looked at her and whispered that if she wanted answers, she had to trust him. She hesitated. She had known these men all her life, and now a stranger was asking her to follow him. But something in Thomas's eyes gave her courage. She nodded. Together they slipped into the shadows of the colony, fleeing into the night. The discovery had been made. The daughter of the queen had been found. But the journey home had only just begun. Mira ran through the narrow streets of the colony, her heart pounding in her chest. The stars above shone cold and distant, a reminder of the worlds beyond her reach. She could hear the shouts behind them as bounty hunters poured into the colony. Thomas stayed close, guiding her through alleys and hidden paths. His experience in the frontier worlds keeping them a step ahead. For years, Mira had believed she was just an ordinary worker, living in a place where no one asked questions. The people she had known as her family, the miners and traders of the colony, were kind but never spoke of her origins. She had grown strong, smart, and careful, but she had never imagined the truth of her identity. Now it pressed on her like the weight of 1,000 suns. Thomas led her to an abandoned transport hangar on the edge of the colony. Its doors were half broken, but it provided shelter and a place to rest. Mira sank to the floor, clutching her pendant as if it could answer the questions racing through her mind. Thomas knelt beside her. "I know it is hard to believe," he said gently. "You have lived your life thinking you were someone else. But this pendant, your eyes, the stories, they all lead to one truth. You are Princess Lyra of the Scifi Dominion." Mira shook her head. "No, that cannot be true." "I am Mira. I am who I have always been." "I understand," Thomas said. "I would feel the same if I were in your place. But everything I have seen, everything I have followed, points to you. Your family has been searching for you for years." Mira's mind spun. She thought of the night she had heard of a great battle far away. the destruction in the capital, and her sudden separation from it all. She remembered being taken by strangers, kept hidden and raised in the shadows. All those memories came rushing back, even those she had tried to forget. "We need to leave," Tomas said. "They will not stop looking for you. The bounty hunters are skilled and they will not give up. You must trust me." For a long moment, Mira did not answer. Then she nodded, the first step toward accepting the truth. She rose to her feet, her eyes meeting Thomas's with determination. The journey from the colony was difficult. They traveled through asteroid fields and hidden trade routes, avoiding major space lanes where patrols of the Dominion or pirate ships might spot them. Thomas piloted the Wanderer with care, making use of hidden sensors and worn-out maps that only he seemed to understand. At night, Mira sat by the small window of the ship, looking at the stars. "Why are you helping me?" she asked softly. Thomas smiled faintly. "Because I believe no one should grow up alone, separated from their family. And because I believe that the galaxy will be stronger when truth is found. You belong to more than just yourself. You belong to your people." Mira looked down at her hands. She had never thought of herself as important beyond the colony. But something in Thomas's words stirred a part of her she had kept hidden. She felt a flicker of pride mixed with fear and even hope. Days passed. They landed on small, quiet planets to rest and gather supplies. Thomas taught Mira how to move through unfamiliar places without being noticed. He showed her how to read old maps of trade routes, how to avoid sensors, and how to speak to traders who might give information without asking too many questions. Through these lessons, Mira grew stronger. She realized that she had skills she had never thought of as valuable. She could fix machines, navigate star charts, and move silently through crowds. She also learned to trust Thomas, though she still struggled with fear. One evening, while resting on a moon with twin suns setting in the horizon, Thomas showed her something important. He opened a small case containing old messages and records he had gathered from the colonies and traders. "These," Thomas said, "are messages from your mother. She has never stopped searching for you. She asked her people to watch for you, to follow rumors. The pendant you wear is the only key to your identity. It glows faintly to remind you who you are." Mira traced the pendant with her fingers. Its glow seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat. She felt a strange warmth, as if the object contained the love of someone she had never seen. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I am really her daughter?" "Yes," Thomas said firmly. "You are, and she waits for you. But first we must reach her. The journey is not easy. Many will try to stop us. Some want to keep you hidden forever." Mira took a deep breath. She had spent her life hidden, afraid, and unsure of her place in the galaxy. Now she felt a resolve she had never known. She would not run. She would not hide. She would face the truth, even if it was frightening. The next day, as they left the moon, Thomas navigated the Wanderer toward a cluster of remote asteroids. There they would hide while planning the next stage of their journey. It was risky, but staying in populated areas was even more dangerous. During the flight, Mira asked Tomas about her mother. She wanted to know what kind of person had raised someone she had never met. Thomas spoke of the Queen's strength, her wisdom, and her courage during the uprising. He told Mira that her mother had faced impossible decisions, balancing the safety of her people with the hope of finding her daughter. Mira listened silently, imagining a woman who had endured years of pain without giving up. She realized that the same strength ran through her own veins. She could feel it in her heartbeat, in her determination, and in her desire to reclaim her place in the galaxy. As they approached the asteroid field, danger arrived sooner than they expected. A small fleet of bounty hunters appeared on their sensors. Thomas's eyes narrowed. He adjusted the ship's course using the asteroids for cover. The hunters fired, but Thomas maneuvered the Wanderer with skill born from years of experience. The ship dodged lasers and flares, gliding between massive rocks and debris. Mira held tightly to her seat, her heart racing, but she noticed something remarkable. She was not as afraid as she had been before. She trusted Thomas, and she trusted herself. After hours of tense navigation, they lost the hunters. The asteroid field provided enough cover to hide the ship. Mira stepped out onto a small platform that overlooked the vast darkness of space. She breathed deeply, feeling the emptiness of the stars, yet also a sense of purpose she had never known. Thomas approached her. "You are ready," he said simply. "Ready to meet your mother. Ready to face the truth. Ready to reclaim what was taken from you." Mira nodded, feeling the weight of her destiny. For the first time in her life, she did not feel lost. She felt a spark of hope, strong and bright. Over the next weeks, they followed the final clues that Thomas had collected. They traveled from quiet trade worlds to abandoned colonies, piecing together the hidden path that had kept Mira's identity secret for so long. Each day, Mira learned more about herself. She practiced moving quietly, speaking confidently, and trusting the instincts she had honed in the colonies. They met people who remembered the princess, people who had seen her as a child and kept the memory alive in their hearts. Each story strengthened Mira's belief that she was not alone, that she was meant for something greater than the life she had known. Finally, after months of careful travel, they reached the edge of the Dominion. Mira looked at the distant stars, imagining the palace where her mother waited. She could see fleets of ships in orbit shining like jewels in the darkness. Thomas placed a hand on her shoulder. "The hardest part is next," he said. "We must pass through the last defenses, but you are ready. You are not the same girl who hid in the colonies. You are Princess Lyra, and the galaxy will see your strength." Mira nodded, her grip on the pendant tight. She had grown from a hidden child into a young woman who understood her own power. She felt ready to face her past and reclaim her future. Together they set course for the heart of the surreal Dominion. The journey had been long and dangerous, but it had also been full of growth, trust, and courage. Mira had discovered herself, learned to trust a stranger who had become her guide, and prepared to meet the mother she had longed for without even knowing it. As the wanderer glided through the empty space, Mira looked out at the stars. She felt hope, fear, and determination all at once, but most importantly, she felt ready. The hidden daughter was no longer hidden. She was ready to step into her destiny. The wanderer glided silently through the dark stretches of space, carrying Mira and Thomas closer to the heart of the surreal Dominion. Every star they passed seemed to mark the path of destiny, and Mira could feel the weight of what lay ahead. The palace, the queen, the people she had never met, everything that had been a distant story was now within reach. Thomas piloted the ship carefully, avoiding main space lanes where patrols could detect them. He had studied the Dominion's defense grids and knew which routes were lightly monitored. But danger remained. Bounty hunters, pirates, and spies loyal to the enemies of the Queen still searched for any sign of the lost princess. For Mira, the journey was more than a physical trip. It was a journey of the mind and heart. She had grown, stronger and braver during their travels, but doubts lingered. She remembered the night of the uprising, the chaos of her abduction, and the years spent hiding in alien colonies. Could she truly face her mother after so long? Would the Queen recognize her? Thomas noticed her silence and spoke gently. "You have grown much, Mira. Stronger than anyone I have met in this part of the galaxy. Your mother will see that. You are ready for her." Mira looked out at the stars, feeling both fear and hope. "I hope I can be the daughter she lost. I hope she will not be angry that I am late." Thomas smiled. "She has waited all these years. Love does not fade. You are her daughter. That is enough." Days passed as they moved through hidden corridors of space. Thomas kept them in constant motion, using asteroids, abandoned satellites, and hidden wormholes to avoid detection. Mira practiced patience, learning to read the sensors and understand the subtleties of space travel that Thomas had mastered. She realized how much she had grown since leaving the colony. One day they reached a system on the outskirts of the Dominion. Reports indicated that a small fleet of rebels had been spotted in the area. Thomas decided to wait, hiding in the shadow of a gas giant. They watched silently as the rebel ships moved past, unaware of the wanderer's presence. Mira felt a mix of fear and excitement. "We are close," she said. "I can feel it. The stars look different here, like they are guiding us home." "Yes," Thomas agreed. "The palace is near, but the last part will be the hardest. The Dominion is strong, and many will test us before we reach the Queen." As they moved deeper into Dominion space, they encountered a blockade. The patrol ships demanded identification. Thomas spoke calmly, sending false signals to avoid conflict. Mira felt her pulse quicken as the ships scanned their vessel. For a moment it seemed as if they might be discovered, but Thomas's careful navigation allowed them to slip through the defenses. Once past the blockade, they entered a quieter region near the outer ring of the capital system. Thomas set course for a small moon where loyalists of the Queen had hidden stations. These were people who had not forgotten the lost princess. They provided food, medical supplies, and safe harbor for Mira. During their stop, Mira finally allowed herself to ask the questions she had kept inside. What will happen when we reach the palace? Will the Queen even believe me? Thomas looked at her with steady eyes. At first, she may be unsure. She has waited a long time and seen many false leads. But your pendant, your knowledge of the family, your courage, all of it will show her the truth. And when she sees you, she will remember everything. Mira nodded, feeling a mix of determination and nervousness. She understood that the final steps of their journey required not only skill but bravery. The next leg of the journey was the most dangerous. Thomas guided the wanderer through asteroid belts, nebula clouds, and debris fields to avoid both detection and pursuit. Mira watched the stars change around her, learning to trust Thomas's experience and the instincts that had grown inside her. One evening, as they navigated a field of dark asteroids, a fleet of pirate ships appeared on their sensors. These were well-armed vessels, and their captain had no interest in mercy. Thomas's hands moved quickly, adjusting the ship's shields and thrusters. Mira felt the tension in the cabin as the pirates fired warning shots. We cannot outrun them in open space, Thomas said. We must use the asteroids. Trust me. Mira nodded, gripping her seat. The wanderer weaved through the rocks, twisting and turning in precise maneuvers. Laser fire bounced off asteroids, creating flashes of light in the darkness. Mira's heart pounded, but she did not panic. She followed Thomas's instructions, helping him anticipate the movement of the rocks and the fire of the pirates. Hours passed in this tense dance. Finally, the pirates gave up, frustrated by the small ship's agility. Mira breathed deeply, feeling the first release of tension. We made it, she whispered. Yes, Thomas said. But we are still not home. The palace awaits and we must be ready for anything. As they approached the capital system, Mira saw the distant glow of the palace orbiting the main world. Its towers shone brightly, reflecting the light of 1,000 suns. She felt a surge of emotion, a combination of fear, hope, and longing. This was the place where she had been born, the place where her mother waited. Thomas spoke softly. We will approach carefully. There are those who will test us, who may not understand our mission. Stay close to me and trust yourself. The wanderer moved closer to the orbital paths, using hidden channels to avoid sensors. Mira watched the palace grow larger, its walls gleaming with metal and crystal. She could see the landing docks, the patrol ships, and the busy activity of the capital world. Suddenly, alarms blared from the wanderer. Thomas glanced at the sensors. A small fleet of unknown ships had detected them. Mira felt her pulse quicken. The last obstacle had arrived. Thomas's hands moved quickly over the controls. We cannot fight them head-on. We must use speed and stealth. Mira leaned forward, helping him adjust shields and calculate trajectories. She realized how far she had come since the colony, how much she had learned and how capable she had become. With a sudden burst, the wanderer shot through a hidden channel between two large orbital stations. The unknown fleet fired, but they were too late. The ship slipped through the defenses, emerging near a quiet landing platform hidden beneath one of the palace's lower towers. Thomas and Mira landed carefully, cloaking the ship to avoid detection. Mira stepped out, feeling the weight of the moment. The palace loomed above her, shining like a beacon. She felt both small and powerful, ready to face the mother she had never met. Thomas placed a hand on her shoulder. This is it, he said. No matter what happens next, remember who you are. You are Princess Lyra. You are brave, strong, and ready. Mira nodded, her eyes on the palace. She felt the pendant around her neck pulse softly, a reminder of her heritage. The journey back had been long, dangerous, and full of lessons. She had learned to trust, to fight, and to believe in herself. Now she would face the final step. Together they moved toward the palace, aware that loyalists and enemies alike would be watching. Mira's heart beat faster with every step, but she felt a strength she had never known as a hidden girl in the colonies. She was ready. The gates of the palace rose before them. Guards at the entrance looked suspiciously at the small human and the young woman with a glowing pendant. Thomas spoke calmly, identifying them as travelers with a message of great importance. Mira stayed silent, letting the pendant speak for her. Its faint light seemed to call out to those who remembered, drawing attention to the truth it held. The guards hesitated. Then one stepped forward and spoke to the command center. Moments later, a signal came and the gates opened. Mira and Thomas entered the palace, moving through halls that were both familiar and alien to her. The walls reflected light. The floors gleamed and the air carried the weight of history. At last, they reached the inner chambers. Mira paused, feeling a surge of emotion. Beyond the doors waited the queen, the woman who had searched for her daughter for years, the ruler of the Dominion, the mother she had never known. Thomas gave her a reassuring look. "This is it. Step forward and remember who you are." Mira took a deep breath, lifted her head, and walked into the chamber. The great capital of the Scifi Empire stood like a shining crown among the stars. Towers of crystal reached high into the sky, and rivers of light ran through the streets. Every corner of the city carried the sound of music and the hum of ships arriving from distant systems. Yet behind the brightness there had always been a shadow, for the Queen of Scifi had ruled without her daughter for many years. Her heart carried the weight of hope and sorrow. When Daniel and the young woman arrived in the city, the gates of the royal court opened slowly. Crowds gathered, whispering to each other. Many had heard stories of the lost princess, but most no longer believed them. The people saw a human leading a woman dressed in simple traveler clothes, and they wondered who she might be. The queen sat upon her throne in the Hall of Radiance. Her eyes were older and her crown seemed heavier than ever. Yet her spirit had never broken. She looked at the two figures entering the hall. Her guards lowered their spears and kept the path clear. The hall was silent except for the sound of footsteps echoing against polished stone. The young woman stepped forward and Daniel walked beside her with steady calm. The queen's gaze fixed upon the face of the woman. At first she did not breathe, as if afraid her heart would deceive her. But then she saw a familiar spark in the young woman's eyes. It was the same spark she had once seen when her daughter played in the royal gardens, laughing among the flowers. The queen rose from her throne. She walked down the steps slowly, her robes flowing like a river of silver. No guards moved to stop her. No ministers spoke a word. Every voice in the hall was silent as the queen reached out her hands. "My child," she whispered, her voice trembling yet strong. The young woman felt her chest tighten. She had lived her life far from palaces and titles, but something inside her stirred, something deep that answered without words. She placed her hands into the queen's. The queen's tears fell freely as she pulled her daughter into an embrace. The hall that had been silent erupted into sound. Some cried in joy, others gasped in disbelief. The royal ministers looked at one another, uncertain what this moment meant for the empire. Yet none could deny the truth before them. Daniel stepped back, allowing the reunion to unfold. He watched as the queen held her daughter close. He had crossed stars, faced suspicion, and carried hope across the void. But this was the moment he had traveled for. His role was not to rule or command. His role was to return what was lost. The queen lifted her head, her arms still around her daughter. She looked at Daniel with eyes full of gratitude. "Human traveler," she said, "you have done what none of my fleets could do. You have brought my daughter home. You have restored my family and given new life to my people. Speak your name so it may never be forgotten." Daniel bowed his head respectfully. "I am Daniel of Earth," he answered simply. He did not raise his voice, but the name carried through the hall. Every noble, every guard, every servant heard it. The word spread quickly beyond the court and into the city. By nightfall, the name of Daniel of Earth was known in every district, from the shining towers to the quiet gardens. The queen guided her daughter to the throne, and together they sat for the first time in many years. Ministers stepped forward to confirm the truth, examining the old records and the marks of royal lineage that the daughter carried. All doubts began to fall away. The princess, once thought lost forever, was now among them. Outside, the people of the capital gathered in the great plazas. News spread faster than fire, and soon crowds filled the streets holding banners of light and flowers of crystal. Songs rose into the air, and for the first time in generations, joy carried through every district without shadow. The queen stepped onto the balcony with her daughter at her side. Daniel stood behind them, unnoticed at first, but the queen raised her hand toward him. "This human," she declared, "has shown us the strength of hope. He has crossed the stars not with armies, but with faith. He has brought my daughter home when all others had failed. Let it be known that humanity is not a wandering people without place. They are the bridge that can unite worlds." The crowd roared with approval. Thousands of voices lifted together, not only for the return of the princess, but for the recognition of a people once overlooked. Humanity had always been seen as young, short-lived, and unimportant among the great empires. Yet here was proof that a single human could do what no fleet or council had done. The princess stepped forward and spoke with a clear voice. "I was raised far from this palace. I learned to work with my hands, to live among many people who were not of Kilari. I learned that strength is not only in crowns or ships, but in kindness and in courage. This human reminded me of that truth. Today I return not only as daughter of the queen, but as a bridge between worlds." Her words spread through the plaza, carried by the voice of the city itself. The people raised their banners higher, their voices rising until the very towers shook with sound. The queen placed her hand upon her daughter's shoulder, her eyes shining with pride. Later that evening, the queen invited Daniel to a quiet garden within the palace. Lanterns glowed softly among trees of silver leaves, and the sound of flowing water filled the air. The queen spoke gently. "Daniel of Earth, I have seen many leaders, many envoys, and many warriors. Yet it was you, a simple human traveler, who returned my child. Tell me, why did you risk so much for us?" Daniel looked at the lantern light and then back at the queen. "Because no family should remain broken if there is a chance to heal it. Because every child deserves to find home. And because I believe humans are at our best when we help others." The queen's heart was moved once again. She bowed her head to him, though she was the ruler of an empire. "Then your people are richer than many who claim to hold power," she said. The princess walked beside Daniel in the garden. She smiled, though her eyes were still wet with emotion. "You gave me back a part of myself I did not know was missing. For that I will always call you my friend." From that day forward, humans were welcomed in the Solari Empire not as outsiders but as trusted allies. Trade routes opened, councils shared seats with human envoys, and new projects were built together. Where once humanity had been seen as small, now they were seen as essential. Years later, songs would still be sung of the day the lost princess returned. They would tell of the queen who never gave up hope, the daughter who learned wisdom among strangers, and the human who brought them together. Children in the plazas would play games where they pretended to be Daniel of Earth, guiding a princess home. In the halls of learning, teachers would tell the story as a lesson that hope, courage, and kindness could achieve what force never could. And through it all, the Solari Empire shone brighter than ever, no longer marked by sorrow but by unity. The queen grew old with peace in her heart. The princess took on new duties, guiding her people with the wisdom of both palace and frontier. And Daniel continued to travel, for the stars still held many stories waiting to be healed. Yet wherever he went, his name was remembered. Daniel of Earth, the human who restored an empire. Daniel of Earth, the bridge between worlds. His footsteps faded into the distance, but his legacy remained in every light that burned across the Solari skies. In the end, the reunion was not only of a mother and child. It was the reunion of empires, of hearts, and of hope itself. And in that reunion, humanity found its place among the stars.